On June 1st, in Florida, a 12 and 14-year-old ran away from a group home, broke into a barren house, and engaged in a shootout with law enforcement using guns they had allegedly stolen from a house they had broken into hours before. The homeowner said the children had access to an AK-47, a handgun, a shotgun, and a large amount of ammunition. The 12-year-old boy confessed to the investigators that he had grabbed the AK-47 and two fully loaded magazines for the AK from a case in the bedroom. The deputies tried to surround the building and tried to talk to the boy and girl and surrender peacefully. But the children started shooting with the homeowner's guns at the deputies. The 12-year-old later told investigators that the 14-year-old said, "I'm gonna roll this down like GTA," referring to the video game. Volusia County Sheriff Mike Shitwood threw his personal phone to the kids and tried to make contact. Nothing worked, Shitwood said on Wednesday at a news conference. They were coming out to kill cops, Shitwood told reporters Tuesday night. The boy said he had fired a large amount of rounds at the police and was on his second magazine at this point. After allegedly firing at the deputies for 30 minutes, the 14-year-old came out of the garage and aimed a shotgun at two deputies. She was shot and wounded by a deputy, suffering life-threatening injuries, but deputies say on Wednesday afternoon she's critical but stable. The boy who wasn't hurt surrendered. A positive outcome of this story is that more gun laws should be built so less tragic events like this can occur. I believe that more gun laws should be released stopping these type of tragedies. My two sources apparent in this news update were CTV News and CBC News.
A 41-year-old man in China's eastern province of
Zhenjiang
has been confirmed as the first human case of infection with a rare strain of bird flu known as H10N3, Beijing's National Health Commission has said. The man, a resident of the city of
Jiangdu
was hospitalized on April 28th and diagnosed with H10N3 on May 28th, the Health Commission said on Tuesday, adding that his condition is stable. It did not give details on how the man was infected, but the investigation of his close contacts found no other cases and the risk of spread was very low. Little is known about the virus, which appears to be rare in birds according to the Food and Agriculture Organization, and does not cause severe disease. Avian influenza viruses that have little impact on birds can be much more serious in people, such as H7N9 strain that killed almost 300 people in China during the winter of 2016 and 2017. Such cases occur occasionally in China, which has a huge populations of both farmed and wild birds of many species. And with growing surveillance of avian influenza in the human population, more infections with bird flu viruses are being picked up.
Two opposing views is that the
government needs to make sure the bird flu doesn't become a deadly virus.
And from COVID, the governments are much more prepared to handle any new diseases such as the bird flu.
My sources were CBC and Global News.
Billionaire named Richard Branson is one of the founders of the space program known as Virgin Galactic, which had launched a test flight for a space plane they had been working on for years. On May 22nd, they launched a spacecraft named the VSS Unity that had reached an altitude of 44,000 feet, which then was launched into space using an aircraft called the VMS Eve. After being released, the rocket accelerated to about 3 times the speed of sound. They had managed to do a slow and long backflip with this spacecraft reaching an altitude of about 293,000 feet, before landing back in New Mexico, where it had been launched from. Virgin Galactic is now one step closer to achieving their goal of space tourism. They plan on selling $250,000 tickets for a 90-minute space flight, which will allow the rich people to experience space travel for the thrill and enjoyment of it, rather than for research and extensive training. This space plane may also lead to the improvement of travel on the global scale, as they can move much faster and land back on another airstrip. Many people believe that space travel is a waste of money and resources because there are already many problems on Earth that need to be solved before we try and expand our reach. Why spend all this money to create space tourism when the money could better go towards world hunger and to help keep people out of poverty? I believe that this is a great way to give people the opportunity to experience space travel for themselves instead of primarily government figures, and will help us develop newer technologies to help better the world later on.
On Thursday, May 27th, it was confirmed that there were 215 children buried on the site of the former Kamloops Indian residential school. These children were often buried after dying from mistreatment, as the school's whole purpose was to assimilate children into their own ways. Children some as young as 3 were students at the school, which was once the largest in Canada's residential school system. Kamloops Indian Residential School operated from 1890 to 1969, with a peak enrollment of 500 in the 1950s. The federal government took over administration of the school from 1969 to 1978, using the building as a residence for students attending the Kamloops school. I believe the deaths are undocumented, though the Royal British Columbia Museum is working to see if any records can be found. The two sources used for this is Global News and CBC News. With this news coming out, it may bring up past trauma of residential schools to people who are still hurting from the system created by the government, but may bring closure to families who were lied to by the government about their children. This story connects with globalization, as Canada was not the only country to have residential schools, and needs to show the rest of the world that it was not right to make residential schools and be a role model on how to deal with the past by helping people affected as much as possible.
Try setting your headphones thing to Arctis 5 chat. I think that's the... Set it to what? Loud audio.
Are you? He's back to chat.
He's back to him.
I got killed by a guy with a fucking pistol that zooms in on me. He just one hits me.